the caveat to offer before I answer your submitted questions, and let me grab Zoom submissions. I should say, no one has asked the question, why do you always have your phone up there in the pulpit? And the answer is that the Zoom chat is open on it. Is that none of these are final answers. They are, as ever, open to argumentation and interpretation and disagreement in general. I am not the final word on really anything in this life. If you don't believe me, ask my 4.5-year-old. She'd be happy to offer you a litany of my crimes and errors. So. We'll start here. There is so much to be angry about, but I find that it messes with my serenity. Your thoughts? To which I say yes. I am a person who, like many in this world, I would say, sort of flirts with the line between righteous rage and self-righteous rage, and outright sort of like, at what point does your outrage about the state of the world, about something, about some injustice, right? At what point does that stop being useful and start just being you're mad for the sake of being mad, or you're mad because you like being mad? Kind of getting spun up again and again and again. And I think that this is something where there is certainly an incentive to participate in what I would describe as the outrage cycle or the rage cycle. And that sometimes outrage is helpful. It spurs us to change, to do things, to act. But that if all outrage ever does is spur us to get real mad and then have to deal with it in some coping mechanism that's not always very healthy, and then wake up the next day and immediately look at our phones to discover what we should be outraged about today, I don't really know if that's helping anybody. And so what I would say is that what is your anger leading you to do? Is your anger leading you to make changes in your life, to work for changes in your community? Is your anger spurring you to change the thing that's making you angry? Or is your anger just spiking your blood pressure and then making you doom scroll through the news? Because in that case, I agree, it's messing with your serenity, and it's probably both making you unhappy now and honestly probably shortening your life too. And so I think about sometimes when I think about rage and anger and those pieces in our life, this leads into the next question, which is, what is your spiritual practice during the week? And I have not been able to do it as much over the last 6 months or so as I would like to, but that for a while now, my spiritual practice has been, and I think will continue to be, that I box. I punch things. I think about it like this, right? When something has an electric charge, the way you make it safe again is that you let it discharge. I think about boxing like that, right? It's a safe discharge. And so I would say, if you, whether you're this questioner or just somebody who feels this way, if you feel like anger is ruling your life, I would invite you to find a discharge. And it's not always anger at somebody in your, right? It's like anger, it's almost worse. It's anger at some ineffable other source. It's anger at them. It's anger at the other side. It's anger at some politician who you do not personally know. And so the chances that your anger is actually going to make it to that person's desk are minimal. Right? It's to find a safe discharge for that energy so that you can then go and do the next thing and keep going. And then there's a whole series of questions here that are about religion and religious identity, and particularly about Unitarian Universalist identity. And so some of the answers are the same, so I'm sort of arraying them for myself so that I can answer them all at once. So to sort of take us down this path, and there's 4 different questions, right? Is that somebody asked, what does religion mean to you? And I would say that religion to me is about right at the core of that word, if you get nerdy about the Latin, right, that religion is about being bound together. That the L-I-G in religion is the same as the L-I-G in ligament, right? It's about connection and being together, to be brought together. And so for me, religion is not about dogma or belief or even the particulars of what you do or don't do on a Friday night or a Sunday morning or a Saturday evening, right? It's about how you're in community with each other. And that, right, which there's another question that says, what's the absolute best part of being a UU? Absolute best is capitalized. I decided to save you all and not scream it into but it does feel important that you know that this is not just the absolute best, this is the absolute best part of being UU. Is that, right, is that this is a religious community centered on the notion that how we are in community together is far more important than the particulars of what you or I do or don't believe about life's big questions. That how we are together is the most important piece of religious community. And that how we are together involves supporting each other's spiritual journeys, theological exploration, deepening, all of that is included in religious community, and that's all important. But that the thing that binds us together, that makes us who we are as Unitarian Universalists, is not the particulars of a path, but that we choose to do it together. And I think that's the best part of being UU. And so then here's 2 questions that go together, I would say. This is one that I feel like I get a lot, and that, or not I get a lot, that Unitarian Universalists get a lot, and that ministers get a lot, which is in part about which hyphen you choose to go after your UU. So if you are new, and I will share that many people sometimes identify themselves as I'm a UU Buddhist, or I'm a UU pagan, or I'm a UU Christian, or I'm a Jewish UU. Right? That there's a sense that Unitarian Universalism is merely a container, and that you need some other religious traditions, theology, spiritual practices, etc., to insert into this sort of blank container that is Unitarian Universalism. So the question says, with all the spiritual options available to us as UUs, which one, Buddhism, Taoism, paganism, pantheism, theism, speaks best to me and why? To which my answer is, of course, that the one that speaks best to me is Unitarian Universalism. Right? The thing that speaks best to me is this one. So I grew up Unitarian Universalist. I legitimately don't know how to do church any other way. I've certainly visited lots of other ones because I grew up Unitarian Universalist, which means that I have done lots of religious education curricula where I learned about other faith traditions, where I visit other faith traditions. I went to a United Methodist seminary, learned a lot about how other people do religious community. But that this one, both this particular one here and this one, right, Unitarian Universalism writ more broadly, is the only one that really makes sense to me. It's my natural fit. That's where I belong. And I belong here not because it lets me sort of choose some other religion's theology or spiritual practice to insert into this container. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? To be clear, this is about me. This is not about like, and here's what you should do. I have been UU long enough to know that looking at a room of UUs and saying, and here's what you should do is will not end well at all, is that the idea that how we are together matters most is its own theology. It tells you its own things about, I would use the word God, right? It tells you its own thing about who God is and how God moves in the world, that how we are in relationship with each other is the most important piece. That is a whole unfolding world of possibility about God. And that's what speaks to me. And as you can tell from my answer that I like to box, right, I clearly have a non-traditional approach to spiritual practice. And that this place, these people, are the one that that makes sense to me. And I would say that it doesn't just make sense to me that I have space here, because the next question in this sort of arc of things about what the heck Unitarian Universalism is and what it means to be a UU, et cetera, is that it says, how do people with different religious beliefs fit in the UU faith? This is a question I actually most commonly receive from my colleagues, my clergy colleagues in other denominations. When they say things like, well, like, what's your deal? And I sort of say, like, well, we're like half atheists, like it's a full spectrum. There's a lot of dabbling and lots of different spiritual practices, and they're like, but how do you do that? And I respond that first of all, I don't know how to do it any other way. I legitimately do not understand how to do religious community without theological pluralism, right? Never done it any other way. Don't know how to do it any other way. And the other piece is that diversity is naturally occurring and good for ecosystems. The human beings, the natural world, the sky, the bugs underneath our feet, right? Like there's enormous diversity in the world around us. And the same is true for our theological beliefs. And that getting to acknowledge them and serve people in a way that acknowledges that diversity is life-giving, because I think sometimes what I say, if I know the colleague who has asked me this pretty well, I say, you probably have just as much theological diversity in your pews. You just don't acknowledge it. You just don't talk about it. You pretend that everybody believes the same thing in exactly the same way, and that's just not true. That's just not true. And so I really value getting to pastor a community and to be in a community that acknowledges it and celebrates it. And at the bottom of that question, it asks me milk or dark chocolate, to which the answer is obviously yes. And so with that, we'll transition to the rapid fire portion of this morning's questions. Favorite pizza topping? Oh, tough. Pineapple, probably. I look forward to all of the angry emails on Tuesday morning. Favorite state? Do you have a favorite child? Like, no. But I will say, you know what? Humidity is not my favorite state to be in, so look out, Wisconsin. You better get this fall going real quick here. Why is the TARDIS bigger on the inside than the outside? And that assumes incorrectly that I have ever watched an episode of Doctor Who. I have watched that clip where Vincent van Gogh goes and overhears people looking at his paintings at a museum. I have seen that clip because the algorithm wants me to see that clip, but otherwise I have not seen it. Have you ever had a pimento cheese sandwich? Yes, I love pimento cheese. Which I feel like that's this is a way that you can tell I have once in my life lived south of the Mason-Dixon line. What is your favorite genre of music and why? And I would say that it changes given the day or the hour, but the two things I probably listen to most are a genre I would describe as feelings country. Um, and if you don't know that Tanya Tucker has produced 2 new albums in the last few years, they're incredible. They're produced by Brandi Carlile. She's come a long way since Delta Dawn, and it's truly spectacular. And the other is that I love gospel music. Like, I really love it. I love Kirk Franklin. It's a delight and a half. So those are probably the 2 most frequently listened to. Especially while I'm doing the dishes, which is like the one time of day I have to just choose my music and do a thing. So that concludes the rapid fire portion of this morning's questions. The next question is, what do you think your greatest challenge will be during Christina's sabbatical? Ooh. The looks on your faces is hilarious. I feel like if most of you are thinking like, why would she answer that? That feels... We are entering a portion of the questions that I call the Admiral Akbar portion of the questions, which for those of you who don't know Star Wars references, Admiral Akbar is sort of like the squid face guy who says, "It's a trap." Welcome to the Admiral Akbar portion of this morning's questions. It's a trap. I would say this is a challenge that I have had for a long time and that is not new, but will be exacerbated by Reverend Christina, who is the senior minister here at the fellowship, being on sabbatical from November through February, which is that asking for help is like climbing a mountain for me, right? Sort of saying like, I need your help is not a thing that comes naturally to me. And so if I have ever asked you for your help, know that it was like I felt like I was at the top of Everest when I did it. Because it's just not natural, like it's not how I'm wired. But I also recognize that it's real silly to not ask for help. It's actually not a very good way to be in community. It's not a good way to be an employee. It's not a good way to be a colleague. It's not a good way to be a spouse. Right? That asking for help is actually part of being in community and being together, but it is not my forte. So that challenge will be exacerbated when all of a sudden I have new or additional things on my plate and we're trying to do something together. So yes, here we continue. It's a trap. When will the fellowship have a land acknowledgement and covenant? So if the covenant piece, if that's separate from the land acknowledgement, I will say that the fellowship doesn't call it a covenant, but the fellowship does have a document called the Principles for a Healthy Congregation, which is essentially our set of things about how we want to be together, about how we want to be in community. And in fact, we recently did some revisions on it, none of which are really substantive, most of which are just making it less wordy. So check your upcoming scroll for a survey about looking at the new, less wordy Principles for a Healthy Congregation. Like I said, the substance of them has not changed. We just made them less wordy, which feels like a first for Unitarian Universalists. And when will the fellowship have a land acknowledgement? I do not have an 8-ball, a magic 8-ball, so I don't know. And I am open to conversation. Curious to hear what you think about when is the right time to say those words in a way that's not just saying words because someone has told us that we ought to say some words. When will the fellowship lead in sustainability by installing solar panels? I don't know. Right? I don't know. When, I don't know. But I also know that it's been an ongoing conversation for a long time, and we're open to conversation, but I do not have a magic 8-ball, so I do not know when. And last, what do you think happens when we die? This is one of those where the core of the answer, the shortest version I could simply offer you is, I have no blistering clue. I've been trying to be better about swearing because I have children. I don't know. There is something beyond the human experience. Whether that persists after our brain stops sending little electrical messages to the rest of this, I couldn't say for sure. And I think we won't ever know. And I think that anyone who tells you with absolute certainty that they know beyond any doubt exactly what happens when you die is they're probably selling something. They're selling something, right? Anyone who expresses bald-faced certainty that they know what that experience is like, they can't know. Even if you have a theological commitment to what happens after you die, none of us really knows. And so I think the best thing we can do is try to embrace the mystery with some grace.